First of all, let me welcome Kannan Ramachandran, Chief AI Officer, Chief Commercial Officer at aThingz. Also with us, Paul Cardno, Global Digital Automation and Innovation Senior Manager at 3M. And finally, Carina Negreanu, VP of AI at Robin AI. Hi to all of you, how are you?
Hi, great, thank you.
Good, thank you.
Great to see you. Great to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Well, we've got an awful lot to cover. Not much time to do it in, so let's crack on if we can. Where I'd like to start is really just a bit of a foot on the ball, if you like. Let's do a bit of context setting before we get on to everything else. The term game changer is used very, very liberally, very usefully when it comes to Gen AI, particularly in the enterprise cloud space. Let's just take an assessment of this, about how big a change Gen AI has been to sort of the enterprise cloud world. Carina, if I could start with you. You are top left on my screen, so you get the pleasure of going first for you. For you, how big a game changer has it been so far?
We have already made great progress with Gen AI in many tasks. For example, for Robin, we have been working a lot on creating large amounts of data that we can analyze. And that data is created with Gen AI techniques, from creating reports over hundreds of thousands of documents that our businesses have, and then producing analysis. Even though it is a game changer in many ways, we're still in an early state, given that adoption of Gen AI is just starting, as well as the cloud environment adoption is proceeding as well.
Kannan, I'll come to you next. Kannan, can you hear me? Can you still hear me?
Yeah, was it for me?
Yes, please, Kannan, thank you.
Okay, yeah, no problem. So yes, absolutely. I mean, we've been using generative AI for quite some time, and definitely it has been a game changer for us in terms of how we have adopted this technology and provided value. I mean, the first area that we immediately applied this in the area of, I call it data management, data quality, because the space that we operate in, we are in supply chain, transportation, logistics. The quality of the information is critical, very critical, because that drives the accuracy of the supply chain business decision. So we are using generative AI to enrich the quality of data, standardize it, harmonize it, cleanse it, reduce tons and tons of manual, repetitive work that exists in identifying all those data anomalies we're using there and driving automated insights and more value for our customers.
And Paul, if I can come to you last on this.
Yes, so I'm in a slightly different space as a customer of generative AI companies as opposed to being somebody who works within one. We're seeing this emerging stage where it is going to be a game changer for us, and the use cases we've deployed so far, we can see that real difference. So I'm very much focused around the digital marketing space, and we can see that processes that used to take us maybe 6 to 8 weeks, we're now getting through in 24 to 48 hours. Because they used to involve an awful lot of human interaction, particularly around content being the fuel that drives the marketing car. It really is a big deal for us there. And we're seeing that come in and having a big impact on those processes for us. So it's not fully a game changer yet. There's a huge amount of change management, there's compliance, there's an awful lot to get right in there. But it unlocks one of the key challenges that I think across marketing we've always had, which is generating enough great, relevant content to help our customers. So the potential is there, and we're starting to see the reality.
Well, let's stay with that, if I can, with you for a moment, Paul, because you're coming into, as you say, from a slightly different direction to Carina and Kannan. You know, when it comes to sort of data analysis and that sort of process work that you were just mentioning there, when that change management is coming in, how exciting is it knowing that there is so much change on the way, so much potential on the way to make a huge difference for you in the business?
I think it is a really exciting thing. I think it can be very overwhelming for the people that we work with. I remember seeing just the other day, I think Hugging Face just announced they've now got 1 million user-generated models in their environment that everybody can use. We need to break things down to be really straightforward with the people that we work with within the organization, which is that actually most of those things don't matter, and the complexity and all that they see about in the press is a huge amount of really early stage investment and development. that actually when you come to being more like we are as an enterprise consumer of these products, we can keep a narrower focus on looking at our core business opportunities, our core business problems, and focusing solutions on them rather than necessarily the wow factor of everything and all the things that, again, like historically would be fairly early stage research, which would be behind closed doors, but is now very public and can therefore feel quite intimidating. So part of that change management journey for us there is, yes, incredible technology, amazing advancements, but let's apply them to the things that we already know that we do well, where we have great operations that can adopt this change quickly and really move the needle on how we work.
It's a great example there, and what I love about this particular lineup of guests is we're looking at the topic from 2 or 3 slightly different angles, which really helps the discussion. Carina, if I can come to you next on this, again staying about data analysis, from your perspective and at Robin AI, AI legal assistance work. You touched on it briefly in your opening comment, but the potential there and the power there to shift so much data so quickly and so intelligently, it's incredibly exciting, the amount of work you can get done a lot quicker.
Yes, for sure. I think, actually thinking about Paul's comment, it's an interesting space because there is in a way a tension between what the business needs and what the users of the product need. So we can think about it, especially within data analysis, we always try to think about what are the things the person needs that actually has to conduct this work. From a business perspective, yes, 90% savings in time that we are observing are great. And this is what you want for productivity. But most importantly, we need to build the data analysis tools people can focus on, can use simply, not like the entire space of AI that we currently have today. So our solution is basically try to build tools that are intuitive and have the latest technology, but the users don't have to worry about that side. They just have to have a product that they can use as simply as possibly.
Kannan, if I can come to you on that, again, you're approaching this from a slightly different perspective, sort of an autonomous supply chain perspective. Oh my goodness, there's a lot of data in supply chains. What difference does that make?
Absolutely. So the way we use that, and this is what Paul and Karen are talking about as well, is in terms of applying the right use cases, applying the right area where this could add value, and also it's a very natural process when it comes to change management. So when we already had a data management solution that was using several aspects of data science techniques, profiling the data, having data quality rules and rules engine. But when we infuse generative AI to it, what it immediately added value is it automatically can start generating rules for entities and attributes that you have not even thought that, okay, this is an interesting rule that you need to apply. So that was an immediate, when I say game changer and a productivity improvement, that was value add to a solution that we thought it was already good, but it made it even better, right? And also in terms of, typically we used to have a lot of dashboards and KPIs and metrics depicting how good or bad your data is. But again, with a generative AI, I can either look at all those reports and KPIs and tell me, and infer information, or I can use generative AI, and it would it will automatically give me the insight. So insight automation and driving users to areas where they need to focus on is a huge, I would say, a step change to what we were already doing with respect to master data and data management. So we start there. And we started applying that to different aspects of the business, be it looking at the logistics financials or looking at the overall network performance, or even looking at contract documents, bill of ladings or carrier contracts. We started applying everywhere, automating those insights.
I want to move the conversation on a little bit because we've been looking at a lot of benefits, a lot of positives so far. I'd like to be quite real. There are challenges involved, and there's plenty of challenges in implementing and getting this the most out of it. So for all of you, what challenges do you see businesses facing when deploying Gen AI in an enterprise cloud space? Carina, if I could start with you on this one, how do you see those challenges?
There are many different angles to this. One of them is about building the trust that you need with your clients, that the data, the systems are reliable and they actually support them on their journey. The other one is, especially in our field, and I think Kannan's field as well, when you provide that insight, you really need to be right because people really need to trust you. So how do you do this at scale? And how do you do it in a way that people can effectively interact with the system? They are used to have something in-house where they can just, touch it, go talk to a person. Now it's all in the cloud. It's a very different mindset, and people have to change their mental models. There are also other costs in terms of how do you actually do this in a way that is scalable? How do you do it? How do you trust a provider for a cloud environment? A lot of us basically depend on a big cloud provider. We have chosen AWS, but there are many options out there, and figuring out what's the right solution for you is very important in this space.
Kannan, if I can come to you next, please.
Yeah, sure. I mean, for us, similar kind of a situation, right? I mean, for Microsoft Azure as our cloud partner, that Carina might be quite familiar with from our past. So Azure is our cloud partner, and the thing that even though Microsoft Azure brings a lot of value with respect to, I would say, democratizing the applicability of open AI and how we can use it, but we still have to focus on the privacy aspect of the data, the security of the data. Making sure that the data that we are training, we are providing a lot of transparency to the models that we have in place, making sure there's no bias. So in terms of looking at it from that angle, as well as cost, right? When you look at enterprise cloud, sometimes you can, you think that you're starting off with a few cents, a few dollars, and before you know, the cost starts piling up. So you need to keep the cost angle also in perspective in terms of how you take your design of these generative AI applications, how you engineer those applications from a prompting perspective so that you don't consume a lot of CPUs and horsepower. So that's very important. So those are things that we look at. Data privacy is of utmost important to us, the quality of the data, as well as how mindful we are about the resources that we're using from a financial and a cost perspective is also equally important when we look at enterprise cloud type of situations.
Thank you, Kannan. If I come to you on that, Paul, those challenges.
Yes, so obviously both the previous people have just mentioned a lot of the key things there. A crucial thing for me as we're going through this kind of transformation to using these kind of tools, generative AI is becoming more pervasive, more embedded in the products that we buy from cloud providers. But it's not the same as traditional data. So when I always joke that my very first call when I got given our Gen AI brief in 3M was to our lawyers to say, I need lawyers now. I don't want to go to prison and we've got to get this right. But what we're seeing increasingly is existing providers that we use are just adding generative AI functionality natively to all of their interfaces, make it longer, make it shorter, analyze this, make it French, all of that kind of stuff. That brings an additional degree of risk today in terms of things like IP management and other areas that just didn't exist before. If we added 1 and 1 and got 2 using traditional programming, that was fine. If you do that using generative AI to generate new content, as we know, you can't claim intellectual property rights over it in the current legal system and things like that. But as we move from that situation where, kind of looking back to November 2023, ChatGPT, a destination technology, you're going and using generative AI. As that's now becoming just embedded technology and in future invisible technology, how we keep our employees safe in that they're not using generative AI on something like a patent application, which could be an issue in terms of applicability of that patent in future. That kind of education challenge and how we govern the introduction of that technology when it is, as I say, just being embedded, it's pervasive, it's kind of a non-event in some cases, it feels like, it's going to be a real challenge for us around continuing compliance and education with all of our employees. Because if they don't know they're using it, how can they make sure they're being compliant?
And Paul, I'm not sure if you can see my notes from where you are sitting currently, but you have taken the conversation exactly where I wanted to go next. And very often when we're talking about Gen AI, it's viewed as a tech problem, as a tech issue, as a tech discussion. It is very much also, as you just alluded to, a people discussion as well. From your perspective, how much time, effort, energy is going into making sure, say, the people, as you say there, at a business such as 3M are using it properly and are knowing how to use it and be aware of the risks? It sounds like you've got your house in order. As you say, your first call was to the lawyers, which isn't always a nice call to have to make, but how much time and effort is going into that at the moment?
It's really a significant amount. So 3M actually recently conducted a survey using Kantar across a number of European countries about the use of AI in workplaces. And if you look at the broad numbers at the moment on a daily basis across a fairly distributed workforce, you're talking about less than 10% of people are actively and knowledgeably using AI in their daily work. If you get to weekly, that number gets up into the 30 kind of percents. So we're doing an awful lot on education. Obviously, it started with the compliance, the do's, the don'ts, the don't be using Midjourney to generate your next campaign and your product information until we figured out whether that's okay, those kind of things. But it's a continual communication. So we have quarterly communications and connection forums. 3Mers outside production jobs mostly work from home these days. So as we have these quarterly communications, AI is a central topic that we're discussing with everybody. To be honest, the same way we were about things like GDPR when it came in, we're taking the same kind of approach of it needs to be something that's actively talked about, not just in terms of risk, but also in terms of value. As you'd expect, we have all the compliance courses that we have 100% completion of across tens of thousands of employees. But that becomes about how you get people understanding on a daily basis when they're interacting. So that communication is huge. I think last year I spoke to about 3,000 individual 3Mers, which was brilliant. And every time they asked me a difficult question, we learned something new. This year we've gone much further. And it is a core part of our strategy is also getting people to recognize that the value that's offered from these models just as a general productivity assistant. Unlike a lot of companies, we've had to build our own version of that to manage security and everything else. Just the productivity that they can get on a daily basis just by using it is huge.
I know when I speak to a lot of consultants, the people side of things is absolutely huge, and they're doing a lot of exactly that kind of work that you're speaking about there, Paul. Carina, if I can come to you next, you're obviously approaching the people side of things from a different perspective as a provider of the product, as a provider of the solution. How much work goes into you from your perspective of making sure people are using the technology correctly? As Paul said, it's a minefield out there. There's a lot of things you need to consider. Talk me through that work.
Yeah, so in Robin, this is very important for us because the legal domain is difficult already. So it's kind of like doing something really hard on top of something even harder. So what we actually have is two big teams that are handling two aspects of the business. So something that we call managed service, which is basically a team of in-house lawyers that basically are the mid-level between the client and our software. If our client feels like they're not quite ready yet to transition and use their software themselves directly. So for example, we have some AI that helps companies negotiate contracts. Now, this is quite tricky because the AI, produces loads of content. It's correct, but it's not trivial to verify in some cases. There are loads of subtleties there. So our managed services go in between and basically help our clients understand what has happened, how they can basically correct it themselves and do a good job at it. And we also have an implementation team that helps our clients do things like prompting. So for instance, they teach them, hey, this is kind of how you do prompt, how you phrase it. This is why you would get different answers if you ask kind of the same question, but not quite. This is how these models work. And also from a business perspective, they educate the people who actually have to make decisions about buying software around what actually is a reasonable expectation here, because the market is so full of news and like numbers and everything's over 90%, but really when you start using it, it's at 20%. And then you're like, why has this happened? So we basically are building these kind of two very large teams that are about half our business at the moment to just support the workflow and train our customers and future customers to make the right decisions and empower the staff that is going to use the software.
Yeah, it's a very good example within the legal profession. The fact that's a tough old world as it is, and then you put that in as well. Yes, that's a tough bit of work there. Kannan, if I can come to you next on that, the people side of things, it's crucial. How do you go about it there?
Absolutely, it's a fantastic topic of discussion. People user adoption is very important, and when I talk about user adoption, it's not just using a solution, but in terms of understanding what's the value they're going to get out of it. So we have, to your point that we're discussing earlier, is it is not just a technology team. This is not something that is just, important that the technology team knows how to develop or produce these kind of solutions, but business users, end users should know how to use the solution and understand what kind of value it can bring to their day-to-day activities. So we do have training within our own internal organization to our what we call as our functional consultants, and we also have technology specialists. So the functional consultants get trained on the solution so that when they interface with the customers and they are training the customers in terms of how to use it, they are already experts in that solution. So there's a lot of cross-pollination that happens between the technology specialists and the functional consultants, because they kind of learn from each other. When the technology team develops the solution and the functional consultants use the solution, there's a lot of questions they ask. And in that process, it gives an opportunity for our product teams to go back and tune the solution and make it better. So that collaboration, that bridge is absolutely critical for the business that we are in, because ultimately all we are trying to do here is address and add value to our customers. And that can only happen when you have the right level of user adoption and knowledge and training that could be translated across the organization.
I'm going to move on to what I would openly admit is a fairly impossible question, really, because there's no right or wrong answer to it. And I know with conversations I have across multiple industries, and as Paul, you were alluding to about how Gen AI seems to become, it's a foundation to everything now. It's entering every kind of system, every kind of solution. The question that I often come across is businesses unsure about how fast and how far to go. They don't want to get left behind. They're slightly nervous at being right at the bleeding edge because they don't want to get it wrong and go too far too fast. How do you strike that balance? And as I said, it's an impossible question. Kannan, what advice would you have for people about how do you balance pushing ahead of implementing AI into your systems, into your enterprise cloud, whilst making sure you're making smart decisions at the same time? I apologize for the impossible question, but what are your thoughts on that?
No, I mean, I agree with you, right? There's no right or wrong answer, but I would say, start small, get some, quick wins. We, as an organization, encourage innovation, and along with it comes experimentation as well. So you need to foster that kind of an environment for your team so that they have the ability to innovate, to experiment, and create some quick wins, and you build on top of that. You're not going to be able to solve everything at once with generative AI. There's a specific business problem that you're trying to address, or you're trying to enhance what you already have in place. And for us as an organization, since we were already in the AI space, in enterprise cloud already, we were using machine learning, deep learning, several data science techniques already in place. But even for an organization that was very fluent and very comfortable in AI in general, when it came to generative AI, we took baby steps in terms of let's pick an area where it would add value right off the bat and demonstrate success in it. And then we kind of slowly expand it. So I would say start slow, start small, but get that quick win, get that learning, and gain confidence as an organization, and slowly start marching your way to other high-value use cases.
Thank you, Kannan. Paul, if I can come to you next on this one, I know it's a subject you've alluded to already in this conversation. What's your take on that? I apologise for the impossible question.
So we laid out, as we started the work beginning in 2023 with our business partners within the company, I laid out a set of about 6 or maybe 7 criteria for any Gen AI project that we were going to take on, which went from do we have existing data to do we have the rights to change the data? Do we have standardized processes? Do we have a value proposition was kind of an important part of it, the compliance side and a few others. So we were able to target business processes that were already stable. Applying something like Gen AI to a process that's already chaotic is just going to make it more chaotic and add more risk into it. So as part of one of the things that we've actually built in 3M over the last 10 years, we have a centralized digital operations function that if you want anything on the web, if you want anything out through marketing automation, campaigns, social, product content, marketing assets, it comes through our central team. So we have a really stable set of operations spread across our teams across the world. So we could pick those spaces where there was already very few variables. So we could look at marketing automation where we had a very straightforward to integrate with system with a huge amount of known data, and we could focus on Gen AI for translation in that process, for example. So for all of this, the place to start is where you already have stability, because one of the key things, if you're just using the generally open AI models that are out there, the amount of additional variables that Gen AI introduces, like change of prompt by one word and everything is different, data sets that changed and you don't know why, responses that are the same that were something yesterday and the same prompt gets a different response today. Introducing all of those variables, many of which are controllable, but if you're introducing all of them into an already variable situation, you're going to produce more nonsense faster. So that was really our approach, was focus on the basics of running good business processes and where this can take them to the next level, not as some savior riding in on a white horse that Gen AI is all of a sudden going to make bad processes better. It's not. So do the boring stuff well so that the exciting stuff can deliver the value you need.
Do the boring stuff well. That is a quote I need on a mug, absolutely, because it's absolutely true. If I can come to you last on that, Carina, how do you balance that? Wanting to be at the cutting edge, but wanting to manage how you go about that.
Yeah, Kannan and Paul basically gave really good answers already. And it made me think that in my time at Microsoft, one of the things I was researching when I was in MSR was what actually makes people more productive and what does even productivity mean? Because that's the thing that we basically put on any AI system today, is that it makes your company productive, your people, everyone's productive. But I think it's such an internal feeling. It's about basically diminishing the cognitive load people have to go through. And this kind of makes it an interesting perspective because you have to think then, what are the attributes of an AI system that actually do help on cognitive productivity? And one of them is that it has to be easily verifiable. There's no point in using AI on things that are like incredibly hard to verify, because in the end, who's responsible for the output of an AI model? It's still the people who use the AI. We can't blame the AI for everything, which kind of targets our applications in spaces like search, for instance, where you're gonna get loads of interesting results and references and research, especially in the legal domain, but it's not meant to be comprehensive. No one guarantees that you're gonna get every single relevant reference, but it speeds you up to a level that you do feel productive and you can easily go through it. Same thing with boilerplate code, for instance, in the coding domain, where it's easy to verify that the part you're producing is the thing that's the right thing, and then you can do the hard part of building the algorithms. So I think that people should think about in their businesses around what are the things that their employees can verify easily when they use AI? What are the things that their employees feel like they actually gain productivity value and they feel like better at the end of their workday so they can focus on the things that are actually important for the business?
Thank you, and I'll just quickly go to the questions that are coming in from the audience. I'm going to have to round these up into a sort of a theme here. We've got questions here about the impact on data centers and energy for the density of new AI workloads. Questions from Brian and Steve there. For all of you, how important is it that business infrastructure can actually support the pressure that Gen AI within an enterprise cloud space is going to put on things? I'm not sure if anyone in particular wants to take that, because obviously there's a lot of infrastructure work to be in place, almost the boring stuff, as you were saying a second ago. How important is that to make sure that's in place? Anyone in particular want to take that?
I'm happy to mention it. So as somebody, obviously we purchase our cloud services and other things. It's an area we're all going to have to be increasingly conscious of. And I read somewhere a few months ago, somebody saying, remember that AI is probably the worst way to do something. And what they meant was there's always options beforehand. If you need to do something like, essentially, we talked a lot about data. If you're doing general statistical analysis, you don't need to use something like generative AI to do it. It should be the thing you use when traditional methods don't work. So when you have to fill the gap on, like in the legal space, a huge amount of natural language processing, or in the logistics space, filling gaps in data by making assumptions as to what they could be, then yes, you should use it. But one of the challenges that I want to make sure that as an organization, for us, for example, we're not just seeing as if we need to add 1 and 1 to make 2, we don't need generative AI to do that. We should use it only at those times when it's necessary to solve otherwise unsolvable problems, or problems that can only be solved at a certain quality level by using it. Because it is a key issue. We can't use the amount of energy that this uses for tasks that don't need it. It's a bad use of our materials, it's a bad use of our money, and it's a bad use of the planet. So using it effectively to solve important problems in the right way is the right thing to do, but it's not the Swiss Army knife for all solutions.
And I agree with what Paul just mentioned. You have to be conscious about what type of business problems you're trying to solve and use your resources wisely and efficiently. And you need to account for the cost aspect of it from an infrastructure perspective when you consider these kind of solutions.
Yeah, I think for me, a lot of it comes down to how can you build systems that basically you can preview, stop, have a glimpse of what's actually happening before, say, you're running very big jobs. Because that, A, gives the users a lot more control, and B, you're not going to end up wasting a lot of resources. So one thing I'm hoping that we are going to move forward in this space is having a lot more thought about how we can preemptively stop a problem that might occur and waste a lot of resources.
Yeah, I think the effective use of Gen AI, that's a whole different conversation that if we started that now, we'd run into the next 4 sessions, which would get me in trouble with the producers. So I'm afraid we are going to have to leave things there. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you all. Thank you so much for joining us here at Tech and AI Live Gen AI.